All right, welcome everybody. I hope you can see me. I can't see myself for some reason, but I hope you can see me. We're doing it a little bit different. If you haven't joined us in a webinar recently, the last few we've done this, but before that, we didn't used to be on camera. So now you get to see me. Now I'm on camera. But welcome. Thanks for being on this month's prosthetic product showcase by Blatchford. This week or this month, we're going to be talking all about hydraulic ankles. So without further ado, let's get going. So just some ground rules or house rules, if you will, before we get started. All participants are on mute, and that just helps for a better experience. There's not as many dogs barking and that kind of stuff in the background. The webinar is being recorded, and you can always find all of our past webinars at on our YouTube channel. That's at youtube.com/@Blatchford Institute. Speaking of Blatchford Institute, we do have an online learning platform. I'm getting lots of emails about our online learning platform because it's the end of the year and CEU credits, and we have a whole ton of CEU credits on there. So that's blatchfordinstituteus.com. You can always find additional CEU credits there. If you have a question, as I said, everybody's on mute. So if you do have a question, type it into the panel. I've got a colleague that's going to be answering questions as they pop up. He's either going to type them into the Q&A panel, or he's going to kindly interrupt me while I'm talking and give the answer to the question if it's something that everybody needs to know. There will be a quiz. That quiz, I've got a QR code on the last screen of the webinar. You can scan that QR code for the quiz, or I will also send it out via a link. So if you can't get the QR code to work for whatever reason, maybe you're watching it on your phone, perhaps, then we can send it out as a link, and you can do that. I do take about a week to submit those, so I'll give you a week to get the quiz done. So you have plenty of time. You can always register for future webinars at blatchfordmobility.com. And go to the training and education page, and there's a webinar section there. So you can register for future webinars. So again, thank you for joining. I always scroll through the attendee list as people are popping on, and it's always fun to see so many names that I recognize. So just thanks for being on. That is our QR code, has all of our information. Again, my name is Mike Magee. I am a CPO. I am the Global Education Manager and Senior Process for Blatchford. I've been with Blatchford for about, well, next month it'll be 13 years. So it's been a great time. And really the reason I joined Blatchford was due to the hydraulic ankle technology and the innovation that they were doing. So this is a product that's near and dear to my heart. And so I wanted to do this webinar specifically on my own. I do have Caleb on the line as well. He's going to be answering any questions that pop up. Caleb, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself. I guess I should have asked you in advance.
Sure, Mike, no problem. Thanks. Hi, everyone. As Mike mentioned, my name's Caleb. I'm a member of Blatchford's clinical team, and I've been with Blatchford for about a year now. I generally cover like the western third of the U.S., but every once in a while you'll see me outside of that. And I'm excited today because I feel like I learn something new every time I get to listen to Mike talk. So looking forward to being a part of
Nice.
today's webinar and answering any questions you may have.
Thanks, Caleb. So I mentioned it briefly, but that is our QR code. If you scan that, it goes into an app called Blink, and then you can add our contact information to your phone. That's got our cell phone and our email on there. And it gives you the opportunity to share your information back with us. So if you do scan that, feel free to send your contact information back to us via that QR code. And then I input it into my phone. And when you call me or text me, I know who it is. So do that if you would like. So what are we going to be talking today about? We're going to be talking all about our hydraulic ankles. And like I mentioned, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I believe it should be your first choice, and I'll talk about that here in a few minutes. But we're going to talk about all of our hydraulic ankles. We're going to identify them and talk about some of the specifics about each one. And we're going to talk about why they're unique and how to fit them and align them and all that kind of stuff, and some fine-tune capabilities of each one. So as I said, we're going to talk about the background first, and we'll go into a little bit of the detailed information for each foot and the fitting recommendations. And we're going to really talk a lot about the evidence. There is an overwhelming amount of evidence for hydraulic ankles. I know there are some misnomers out there, and I'm going to do my best to prove those misnomers false. So stay tuned for that. I'm always excited to share that portion of it. But let's talk about the background and why did Blatchford come up with that? Blatchford came up with the first hydraulic ankle. It came to market in 2009, and and why did they do it? Well, we know amputees have a lot of challenges. We know that 60% report moderate to severe back pain within 2 years of having an amputation. We also know it requires a lot of increased energy expenditure. There's a lot of falls. 58% report a fall in the last year, or 2 to 3 more times more likely to develop osteoarthritis, and 41% report residual home skin problems. And I know this is nothing new to you. If you're seeing patients on the daily basis, you're seeing these residual home skin problems. You're hearing people talk about back pain and pressure ulcers and all of that kind of stuff. So I know it's not new to you. But what we're going to do is try to show you a way to maybe fix some of that, just by changing the foot. So that's what the goal of this conversation is about, is helping you identify this how this foot will help with some of these issues. Because most of these issues, a lot of them are are due to asymmetry when you walk or when you stand, not being able to stand correctly or walk correctly. And the way you load your prosthesis when you're walking is going to change how your residual limb is loaded onto the prosthesis. So we're going to show how you can help minimize those. And we notice this is a typical conventional foot or a biological ankle, a normal foot that's not a prosthetic foot, has 26 bones, 33 joints, and over 100 tendons, muscles, and ligaments. And what do? We try to replace it with a couple of springs and some sort of a chassis. So very few moving parts. And this particular picture is an Elite 2. It's a great foot, but it's a rigid ankle foot, meaning there's no hydraulics in it. We have a metal chassis that attaches a heel spring and a toe spring. And then we try to simulate all those joints and ligaments and muscles and everything that we just talked about on the previous slide. We try to mimic that with these 2 to 3 springs and a rigid carrier. As you can imagine, it doesn't necessarily replace those very well. So what I'm going to do is talk about why hydraulic ankles should be your first choice. It gives you a much better opportunity to mimic that muscle and joints and ligaments and all that stuff and bones that happen in the anatomical foot. It does a little bit better or a lot better job of mimicking those. So I'm going to talk about that. And why do I say it should be your first choice? Because I believe that. I feel like so many prosthetists out there will say, hey, hydraulic ankle, it does make a lot of sense for certain people. So I'll use it on those patients. And they look for that particular patient, the patient that lives on a hill or is walking up and down hills constantly. But I live in Houston. There's not very many hills here. So is it right for those patients? I think we're going to show that it is. So what what the concept of this is that it should be your first choice. You look at a patient comes in, which hydraulic ankle are we going to go with for you? And if it's not the right choice, then you rule them out of that and go to an Elite series or one of the other types of feet that are on the market that are not hydraulic ankles. But I firmly believe that a hydraulic ankle should be your first choice because it provides so many more benefits to patients than a standard carbon fiber foot. And we're going to talk, uh, some people may say in too much detail about the scientific evidence supporting it. So back to the anatomical ankle and how we designed our ankle. If you look at the rockers of an anatomical ankle on the top, we have our heel rocker, our ankle rocker, our forefoot rocker, and our medial lateral rocker. There's also a toe rocker, if you will, at the end of the toes, but these are our main 4 rockers. And what we do with the Blatchford echelon ankle is we have the carbon springs and then the hydraulic ankle to mimic those rockers as close as we can. We have a heel spring, and then and we're going to talk about these springs in a few minutes, but then we also have and that's for the heel rocker, is that heel spring. And then we have our ankle rocker, which is actually mostly in the hydraulic aspect of the foot. And then the forefoot rocker is done by the toes as well as the medial lateral rocker, the toe springs. And our springs are very dynamic and fluid and have a lot of motion within them to give the energy return that patients need. But what I want to hone in on here is that red circle and what that is. So we talked about the ankle rocker, and that ankle rocker happens at a very specific spot. Our ankles are anatomical ankles. They plantar dorsiflex in a specific spot. So it would make sense to make a hydraulic ankle that moves in that anatomical spot. And that's what we did. Blatchford was first to market. Guess what that means? They get to design it how they want. So they designed it in the most anatomically responsible way, if you will. They put that pivot placement in a spot that is the most anatomically designed. So it's right there, right where the natural anatomy moves. And if you look at other hydraulic ankles on the market, you'll notice that pivot placement is not in the same place. So all the evidence that we're going to be talking about, the overwhelming evidence for hydraulic ankles, primarily refer to the Blatchford ankle design. Again, they were first to market, so there was a lot of people questioning, are they effective or not? So a lot of studies happened, and they were all on the Blatchford ankles. So just because there's studies showing this about the Blatchford ankles does not mean it can be applied to other ankles. So when we talk about hydraulic ankles, it's not just a hydraulic ankle. It's a hydraulic ankle that also encompasses carbon fiber springs. So if you look at this image here or animation, this top square piece, that can be equated to the hydraulic chamber in the foot. And we can increase the resistance to hydraulic motion. And what that's going to do is take all the energy of the step and apply that down into the spring, because it's not going to be encompassed in the hydraulics. Versus if we loosen the hydraulics or lower the resistance, it's going to absorb all the energy right here in the hydraulic chamber and not put as much into the carbon fiber springs. So they work in tandem. The way the springs work in relationship to the hydraulic cylinder is really important. That dynamic is what makes the walking so efficient, but still having a self-aligning ankle. In the Elan IC ankle, our microprocessor controlled hydraulic ankle, it takes this to the next level by automatically changing this relationship in real time as the patient walks, to allow somebody to have a lot more energy return because you compress the springs, or something that absorbs a lot more energy, like the one on the right. And that's what the Elan does, is it changes it in real time. For our mechanical ankles, you're adjusting those with a wrench to make sure that you're getting the correct relationship for the patient in their normal day-to-day activities. So we talked about the spring and hydraulic relationship, but we also have to talk about this variable equilibrium position. So standard, like I talked about with the Elite 2, the normal non hydraulic ankles are two springs in a chassis. Well, their equilibrium point is 90 degrees from the ground, or minus the 3/8 inch heel height, I guess. So inside of a shoe, it should be perpendicular to the ground, and it's going to be rigid. If you set it down on the ground, the pyramid's going to point straight up. Whereas on a hydraulic ankle, that neutral position is variable. It changes. It has a little bit of dorsiflexion, a little bit of plantar flexion. So you can stand a little bit on a hill, or a little bit up a hill, a little bit down a hill. You can stand on a little bit different size shoe or heel height of a shoe, and it's going to absorb all that and make your equilibrium position more natural. So we have this variable equilibrium position within all of our hydraulic ankles. And what does that do? That allows for accommodation when you're standing on slopes. If you're in a rigid ankle, like we talked about earlier, that does not have carbon, we're not talking about a satch foot. We're talking about any kind of carbon foot or anything that does not have hydraulic action inside of it. Then it's going to make these type of situations. When you're standing on a hill, you can either bend your knee and share your weight, or but then you've got a bent prosthetic knee here, or you can stand on your heel. But then if you look at the way you've got to bend your hips to be able to stay balanced, it's not a comfortable position. So that's kind of how you're forced to stand with a rigid ankle foot versus a hydraulic ankle. You can stand nice and comfortably and be able to stand equal weight bearing. Again, going back to those challenges of amputees and symmetry. If we can increase the symmetry. This patient here, I can guarantee if he stands on that hill for very long, it's going to have more back pain, right? This one, nice and natural. So continuing with the standing, if you look at this particular picture here, this is standing on flat ground, and you can see the length of this line is the amount of weight that's applied to that particular side, blue being the prosthetic side, red being the sound side. And you can see it's relatively equal on flat ground. When you have it on a rigid ankle foot like this one here, you can see he's got or she's got all their weight on the sound side. That line is much longer. In the hydraulic ankle, it's pretty equal. Standing uphill, It's the same thing, right? You can get a little bit more weight on the prosthetic side on a non-hydraulic ankle, but you can see it's not very well balanced. This patient's probably leaning over at the hips, trying to stay balanced, but he's really or she's really or driving that toe into the ground and driving the knee posteriorly. Whereas this one, they're able to stand much more comfortably and natural. You can see on a fixed ankle, when you're walking, when you come down a slope, they're going to get this rapid rotation. Imagine it's ski time in the winter in the northern states. Not here in Houston. There's no snow skiing here, but imagine walking around in ski boots. Right when you walk down a ramp, what happens if you're walking in your ski boots? You get a rapid knee flexion moment. That knee wants to bend. Or going up a ramp, it's pretty difficult also, right? It pushes back on your knee, making it harder to walk up a ramp. So what do most people do when you're walking very far with ski boots on? You reach down and you unbuckle your ski boots or untie your ski boots. Why? Because you can get ankle motion. It makes it easier to go down the slope. Makes it easier to go up a slope because you have that ankle motion. That's what the hydraulic ankle can provide. And here's a video of a gentleman walking down a KX07, walking down in a rigid ankle versus a hydraulic ankle. Pretty dramatic differences. Same slope, same knee, same shoe, same user. Just change the foot out. So now let's talk specifically about the various products. We have three families, if you will, of hydraulic ankles. We have the Elan family. That's our microprocessor range, where the Elan IC, it's IP67, so it's watertight. And then we have a standard Elan, and then we have our Echelon series and our Avalon series, and we'll talk about each one of these fairly briefly. But let's start with the Echelon line, starting with the Echelon. The Echelon, as I said, was the first to market in 2009. And this was, as I mentioned, the one that really got into light at the time on my radar. I got to see the innovation that they did and the benefit that it provided for my patients. And I saw this happen. I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try this on a patient. It seems pretty novel. I like to try new things, so I'll try it on this patient. He lived in a very hilly area. In fact, he got a tax deduction because his ground was so hilly, and I thought this is the perfect candidate. And it worked great for him because he was able to navigate this wide variety of terrain. It worked perfect. He loved it. So that kind of opened up my eyes a little bit more. And I thought, I wonder if I should be using it on other patients. So then I had another patient that here in Houston that lived on really flat ground, but she had a very small or short residual limb, very bony, not very much coverage at all on it, very bony residual limb. But she was having all kinds of problems with it. And so I thought, you know what, I want to try this on this patient, even though it's a flat ground, and I think of it as a foot for somebody who lives on uneven terrain. I put it on her, and it was amazing the amount of benefit that it provided. It reduced the problems she was having with her limb, the socket pressure and the tissue damage dramatically. So then I thought, wait a minute. Why am I using it on very select patients? I need to open the doors a little bit more to this patient profile and use it on a wider range. And it quickly became my go-to foot. Obviously, not everybody. There are some that do not fit the criteria or the portfolio, if you will, for the ideal candidate. But the vast majority of my patients, they started getting echelons. And why did it work so well? Well, we talked about the hydraulic features of it a little bit, but there's more to it than just hydraulics. We have this dynamic heel, and it's made up of this E-carbon composite. It's a composite of material. It's not just straight carbon. If it would be way too rigid. So it's this composite material that allows for motion, but also provides adequate energy return. Provides the return they need to be able to walk without losing energy. As we talked about in the background slide, there is an increased energy expenditure required for walking with a transtibial or a transfemoral patient or prosthesis. So we can't zap energy. We need to be able to apply the energy that's into the foot into the way the patient walks. So we have this E-carbon that provides this energy management system that helps propel the user and helps give them the energy return that they need to give them a response. We also have, it's not listed on here, but we have this independent heel and toe, and that's one of our patents. You'll notice on all of our feet, we have except the Blade XT, which is a sports specific foot, but besides that, all of our carbon feet have independent heel and toes. And what that means is we have a heel that's bolted to this metal carrier and a toe that's bolted to that metal carrier. That means there's zero crosstalk between the two. When you flex the toe, it doesn't have any effect on the heel or vice versa. They're truly independent. It also means you can mix match if you need to. If you've got a really heavy heel walker, you can get a slightly stiffer heel spring and it doesn't affect anything warranty wise, but it provides the response that the patient needs while still keeping the toe that he wanted or vice versa. So that independent heel and toe is really, really nice. There also means that there's no, because this heel spring is bolted to a metal carrier, this carbon weave is not interrupted anywhere until way back here at the very back where the bolt is to attach it to the metal carrier. There's no interruption in a carbon weave, which means all that carbon gets to flex and store energy and return energy. So let's talk about the Echelon VT, and that was the Echelon. One thing I did not mention real quick, the range of motion on the Echelon is 6 degrees in the plantar flexion range and 3 degrees in the dorsiflexion range. We do have independent plantar and dorsiflexion adjustment using a 4mm wrench. Here's the plantar flexion adjustment. The dorsiflexion adjustment is on the other side, obviously. Echelon VT. So the beauty about the Echelon VT is it's going to have the same heel and toe components, but now we've got in the same hydraulic action actually with a 6 degrees of plantar and 3 degrees of dorsi. But now we've also included 15 degrees of torsion in both directions. So they can twist easier on it. And we also have 4 to 5 millimeters on average of axial compression. So who is this foot good for? It's fantastic for things like golf. Why? Because you get your rotation. You can stand on a downhill lie and still be able to rotate for your golf swing. It's also great for things like, well, pickleball. That's such a big thing right now. Pickleball. Why? Because you can plantar flex your foot a little bit to help you stop when you're getting ready to make your next shot. I guess I don't know what it's called in pickleball, but whatever that is, when you're swinging the racket around, it's also going to provide that torsion, which allows you to be able to do that. So it's a great foot for that type of activity. Anything where plantar and dorsiflexion is important, as well as torsion. So it's all in one complete package. Here's where we use our plantar and dorsiflexion adjustment screws right here. Echelon ER. We're going to pause on this product a little bit and spend a little bit more time. If you caught the beginning of the webinar while we were on waiting for it to start, those of you that joined a little bit early, I had a video of Adria playing here and on it, and I figured that was just more entertaining than a blank screen. But she told her story about what it does, and we're going to talk about that. And I was there for the filming when we filmed her, and to hear her story and what it does is pretty remarkable. The Echelon ER is a mechanical hydraulic ankle with one of the largest ranges of motion of any hydraulic ankle on the market. It's got the same springs we talked about and the same hydraulic pivot placement that we talked about that's so incredibly important to get the motion in the correct spot. We've maintained that pivot spot in this foot. So it's got all those same characteristics, except now you can take it over wider terrain and also provide a few additional benefits that we'll mention. So as I said, it's 25 degrees of hydraulic range of motion. The standard Echelon range is 9 degrees, 6 degrees of plantar and 3 degrees of dorsi. And I also really harp on this dorsiflexion range of motion. That's really important, especially when you're evaluating a hydraulic ankle. You've got to look at this dorsiflexion and what is the you can't just look at the overall range of motion. You've got to look at the distribution of that range of motion. So you have how much dorsiflexion and how much plantar flexion. So in our Echelon range, we have 6 degrees of plantar and 3 degrees of dorsi. In our Echelon ER, we have 25 degrees, 6 degrees of plantar and 19 degrees of dorsi. Flip that, 6 degrees of dorsi, that'd be a whole lot of dorsiflexion. 6 degrees of dorsiflexion, 19 degrees of plantar flexion. So what does that do? You saw in a video, you saw her come out of her house, wearing her wedges, which were about the same as that video, as that picture there, about 2-inch wedges. She reached down, she came out holding her wedges, walking barefoot, sat down on a stoop, reached down, put her shoes on, and just walked off. And it just accommodated all of that motion without missing a beat. No button to press, nothing to do. All she had to do is go put it in the shoe, stand up, and just start walking. But it's not just about higher heels. What about lower heels? We all like to, I know I like when I come home to take my shoes off. Well, so do our amputees, assuming it's safe for them to walk barefoot with diabetes or whatever it is. Assuming it's safe for them to walk barefoot, they like to walk barefoot. When they get home, what are their options? They can either take their shoe off and walk more on their toe, which drives the knee into extension, as you would imagine, or leave their shoe on. And then they're going to be too tall because they take their shoe off on their sound side. So it's not, they don't have great options unless they're in a hydraulic ankle to walk barefoot. So with the Echelon ER, we can go from barefoot all the way up to about a 2-inch heel height automatically. Echelon ER is also waterproof, along with the Echelon. Both of those are waterproof, so you can not have to worry about water ingress into the foot. Sitting comfort with the Echelon ER. Again, 19 degrees of plantar flexion, so you can sit more comfortably. You're not constantly keeping your foot on your heel, so it will allow it to go to foot flat much easier. Improving sit to stand. So I'm going to stop on this one for just a second. If you watch most of your amputees get up from a chair, what do? They leave their sound side foot out just a little bit, especially transtibials, where the knee flexion could be a little bit harder, and without the dorsiflexion, they can't get it back behind them well. So the dorsiflexion range of motion here allows them to put their foot further back underneath them to get up out of a chair using both legs. Again, back to the background and back to the challenges that most individuals with amputation have, asymmetry. If we could be more symmetrical in all that we do, we're going to help the patient overall. So being able to dorsiflex the foot to get up out of a chair is really important. So this 6 degrees really helps with that. The 3 degrees of the Echelon is very helpful, but certainly more than 1 or 2 degrees, but the 3 degrees of an Echelon is helpful, but a Echelon ER at 6 degrees is even more so. Changes in footwear. Like I mentioned, you can go from barefoot up to 6 inches or so. You can see he came out of a tennis shoe. All he did is stand up and just start walking. And you'll notice here when he walks, he's not walking at the end of his dorsiflexion range of motion. You'll see as he progresses over the foot, it continues to dorsiflex. So he's still got range of motion. He's not maxed out there when he walks. Still able to walk much more comfortably as they progress down the walkway. Of course, you can also stand on bigger slopes with a Echelon ER with more range of motion. But does more range of motion also mean more energy absorption, and it won't go into the power of the prosthesis, and it's going to dampen how they walk, and all of that stuff you hear other folks talk about? No, it doesn't show that. That's not what the evidence shows. It shows this increase in dorsiflexion does not reduce the peak power that they have when they come off the toe. In fact, I've got videos of people running in this foot without a problem. They are running on flat ground. They run down a steep slope, and then they keep running on that flat ground. Perfectly natural for them. The increase in dorsiflexion increases the minimum toe clearance during swing phase also. So a patient like this one walking across uneven terrain, because of the 6 degrees of dorsiflexion, they're really going to have a lot of toe clearance when they walk. So it's pretty helpful for them to be able to walk without tripping. Remember, 58% report a fall within the past year. If we can increase their toe clearance, we're going to decrease the likelihood of falling. Echelon vac. This is back to the standard Echelon range of motion, but what did we provide in this one? Well, we've got a vacuum component into it. I think it's a 2 millimeter increase in build height, so very minimal build height difference, very little difference in weight, but you get the benefit of vacuum. And here's a quick little picture of how that works. With the echelon vac, as they walk, the plantar and dorsiflexion range of motion pulls the air out of the socket and expels it out of this valve block here, this one-way valve. So that's where the air goes, but it's the motion of the plantar and dorsiflexion that occurs that makes that happen. The echelon is PDAC approved. It's 5981 and 5968. The others are not PDAC approved, but they follow the same function. We just haven't gone to PDAC with them. The differences are the Echelon VT has the 88 code, which is a vertical shock. Clearly, it's got that with the titanium VT unit that's on top of the hydraulic cylinder. The Echelon VAC has the addition of the 5781, which is our vacuum pump. So both of those have additional codes. The rest are the same as the 81 and 68 of the echelon. So that's our K3 echelon line. So let's talk about our Avalon line. We have two products in that, the Avalon K2 and the Avalon K2 VAC. Tony, Tony's asked a question, is it available in pediatrics? Well, and the foot goes down to size 22. So if it's a pediatric with a size 22, then yes. We don't have specific pediatric sizes, but size 22 is as small as it gets. And there is a minimum weight. Caleb, you'll have to look that up. I think it's 100 pounds, but Caleb can find that while we're talking. So let's talk a little bit more about the Avalon and the biomechanics of K2 gait. So we know this is just typical K2 users, not necessarily Avalon users. This is K2 users. So we know that a K2 individual walks with about a 10% reduction in walking speed. They also have 17% less ankle power generation in late stance. And they walk with about 11% shorter stride length. So shorter steps, less power generation, and a reduction in walking speed by 10%. So hopefully we can get an improvement in those. So let's talk about what the Avalon does and how it's designed. But it was a foot that was specifically designed for the K2 users. It's got this keel design that if you look at the keel, it's optimized for the smooth rollover that they need for those previous things we just talked about that a K2 ambulator walks with. People look at the short keel and think, well, that's going to cause drop off. Well, no, because it works along with the foot shell and designed to provide a smooth rollover for K2 people, those people that are taking shorter steps, less power generation, those patients that this keel design is specifically made for. We also have an increase in range of motion. We have 12 degrees of range of motion in this. So we have 6 degrees of plantar and 6 degrees of dorsal. And that dorsiflexion is really, really important, as well as the plantar flexion. But the dorsiflexion is what I really want to talk about with the K2 market, and especially thinking about how they walk. So again, it's hydraulic ankle technology that provides the perfectly aligned position and efficient rollover for those K2 users and optimized for those individuals with an increased range of motion. So what does that provide? Well, we talked about sit to stand. K2 individuals, they're definitely going to have more challenges going from a sitting to a standing position. So being able to pull that foot further up underneath them with that 6 degrees of dorsal allows them to be able to get up out of a chair much easier. So that's an important thing to consider, is that dorsiflexion range of motion. So when you're looking at K2 hydraulic ankles, evaluate that dorsal range and see if it provides the dorsiflexion range of motion that the patients need. Increased toe clearance reduces the risk of trips and falls. 58% report a fall in the past year, right? So K2 individuals are even more likely than they probably lean more into that statistic than a really athletic K3, K4 individual, right? So if we can give them additional toe clearance, then they're going to do better. And you also have to think about how they walk. A lot of K2 individuals walk a little bit crouched over using a cane or a walker or some sort of walking aid. And being able to clear the toe easier will allow them to be able to, or having that dorsiflexion range of motion will allow them to be able to clear the toe easier, making it better for the patient. An increased shock absorption provides better security at heel strike and reduces interface pressures. I haven't talked as much about that yet, but I'm going to in a few minutes, how a echelon or a hydraulic ankle is going to help prevent stress and pressure on the interface on the patient's limb. And it is waterproof and sandal toe. So a lot of I'm hearing some people do is they fit this on a preparatory. If you do preparatories, you can fit this as a preparatory. And then once they move on to the K3 level or progress into a different type of a foot, then you can still have this foot to use as a backup uh, for a waterproof leg to go for showers or for going to the pool, things like that. It is it's a waterproof system that also has a sandal toe foot shell, so you can wear a sandal with it and that kind of stuff. So if you use preparatories, this may be an ideal solution for you. So as I mentioned, the Avalon K2 has 12 degrees of range of motion, and that's in the 6 and 6 distribution. So 6 plantar and 6 dorsal. It is one valve. Why? These are our K2 individuals. We don't need to stress them out as much walking back and forth to fine tune the plantar and the dorsiflexion range. It's just making the foot overall stiffer or softer. And it's using a 2.5 millimeter adjustment to go from 1 to 3 in the settings. It does have a high weight limit of 330 pounds. All of our other K3 hydraulic ankles have a weight limit of 275 pounds. So the Avalon has a 330-pound weight limit. The Avalon K2 VAC, it's a little bit more of a specialty product, but what is it? It still allows for that easier sit to stand. It still remains dorsiflex through swing phase. It still has the hydraulic ankle action, but this one does have 6 degrees and 3 degrees of dorsiflexion. We'll talk about why in a minute, but it also provides the elevated vacuum that we talked about in the Echelon VAC. We can apply this into the K2 foot if that's something you want to. If you use vacuum with K2 patients, this is a great option for that. It still has that optimized keel shape. The coding for the Avalon K2 is a 5972. That's the K2 code. And then the 5968, which is the hydraulic or ankle action code. And the Avalon K2 VAC has the same codes, but of course we've got the vacuum pump in there as well with the 5781. So when we look at fitting instructions, let's talk about bench alignment. Anytime you order a hydraulic ankle from us, you're going to get this little wedge. That wedge is used for alignment. It just makes alignment that much easier. Before, we used to have to guess a little bit about where the neutral spot is or where the vertical spot is from the 6 degrees of plantar and 3 degrees of dorsal. We had to kind of guess where that was. This takes that guessing out of the equation. So every time you order a foot, you're going to get one of these black wedges, and that's what it's designed for. So what you're going to do is you're going to accommodate the flexion that's needed in the socket. And then you're going to drop your weight line down, and it's going to fall behind the anterior ankle pivot point. Remember, there's 2 pivot points right here. It's going to be in between those 2. That's our anatomically designed pivot placement. That's where we want our ankle action to occur. And use that wedge. To use that wedge, you're going to fully plantar flex the foot, put it inside the patient's shoe, and then put it downhill on the wedge. And that's going to provide a 6 degrees of, when you take it off of the wedge and put it back in neutral, you're going to end up with 6 degrees of plantar and 3 degrees of dorsal. But if you remember, one of these feet, well, not in this picture, but in the next slide, this picture, this foot is different. It's got 6 degrees of dorsal. So what do? We flip it around, put it fully dorsiflexed, put it inside the shoe, and then put it uphill on the wedge. And that neutrals out the ankle to where you have 6 degrees of dorsal and then 19 degrees of plantar. So we try to take the guesswork out of the equation. So let's pause real quick just to make sure you know what offerings we have. As I mentioned, there is a ton of evidence, and I'm not done with evidence yet. I've still got a few more slides here to go through, but I wanted to make sure that you know this clinical compendium has all the evidence we're about to go through. So it's not a mystery. You can find it on our website, all this evidence, and for each outcome, things like decreased energy expenditure. I think that's what that heart there means. You can go across the thing here and see, oh, energy expenditure, and drop down, and every check mark, that study talks about that. So it's really useful to be able to find the studies and the information that you're looking for. So you can get that from our website, as well as white papers. We have 3 different white papers. We have one on hydraulic ankles. We have one on residual limb health, and it's got 3 case studies that are pretty fascinating to read about how vacuum and our Silicare Breathe and our vacuum sockets and our vacuum feet were able to provide some pretty big benefits to patients. And then we also have our K2 white paper. We also have a microprocessor knee white paper that talks about the Orion and how that functions for users. You can find all that information on our website. And again, we do have a virtual education platform at blatchfordinstituteus.com if you need additional CEUs. But let me go back to the evidence real quick. I just wanted to pause there and kind of regroup a little bit. And now we're going to talk about standing alignment with the echelon. So here they're standing on a slope in a rigid ankle foot or a prosthetic foot, and you can look at or a hydraulic ankle foot, and then you can look at the sound side also. So you can see the prosthetic side and the sound side, the fixed ankle versus the hydraulic ankle. And it showed a 30% reduction in the joint moments on the sound limb. So we're talking about the sound limb, 30% reduction in joint moments. And if you don't, I didn't really know what a joint moment was until I got this role of global education, where I'm really dealing a lot with the engineers and the scientists within the company. And I didn't really know what that meant or understood moments. But basically what we're looking at there is the joint wanting to bend, right? When you're standing up straight, you don't want it to bend. So a reduction in moments means it's going to be able to stand more comfortably. You're not having to fight that. In the prosthetic side, we got a 38% reduction in joint moments on the prosthetic side. So a significantly reduction in that moment, making it easier for the patients to stand. And then for an above the knee, you can see the degree of asymmetry, a 9% degree of asymmetry with a non-hydraulic ankle versus only a 0.6% degree of asymmetry with a hydraulic ankle. This is on a 5-degree slope. And you can see the postural sway. Now, we want some postural sway, right? Everybody stands with some postural sway, but we don't want excessive. And 10.6 with a rigid ankle versus only 8 millimeters on a hydraulic ankle. So it improves their balance and allows them to stand more evenly on both limbs. But some of the comments I hear are, it's going to require more energy to walk. You're going to walk slower. Why? Because it's dampening all that energy. You got hydraulics. Hydraulics dampen. It's going to slow everybody down and absorb all that energy. That's not what the evidence shows. That's what people might intuitively think, but that's not accurate. It shows a reduction in metabolic cost of walking by 12%. It shows a 7% increase in walking speed. So they walk faster with the hydraulic ankle, because all the pressure and the energy that's being put into the foot is being applied at the right angles, because the hydraulic ankle is in the correct position, not trying to be at a 90 degrees or perpendicular to the ground. It's coming and being loaded at the correct position. It shows a 24% reduction in inner limb center of pressure movement when standing on the slope, and a 26% reduction in contralateral peak plantar pressure. So again, we're talking about the sound limb here. So we're reducing that pressure on the sound limb by 26%. We know a lot of our patients are diabetic or dysvascular. So if we can help the other limb, why not? So now we're walking on slopes. We know that walking up a slope, it's less tiring using the hydraulic ankle. You're not meeting that posterior directed motion or extension moment at the knee with the rigid ankle. We know it takes more energy. You can see the numbers there. Improved symmetry of inner limb work done on the prosthetic side by 14%. That means the prosthetic side is doing more work than the sound side. Not more work than the sound side, but more work than a rigid ankle foot. And on the sound side, it's doing 17% less work than with a rigid ankle foot. But let's look at pressures. When ascending slopes, the in-socket peak internal stress being applied to that limb. So that's this patient right here, these red spots, when they're walking up in a rigid ankle foot versus a carbon fiber hydraulic ankle foot, it shows a 70% reduction in peak stresses. That means we're decreasing that pressure by 70%, that internal peak stress. And we're decreasing the loading rate by 60%. And what does that matter? What does loading rate matter? Again, I didn't know until I was working with the engineers more. Loading rate, what that means is how quickly you're loading the prosthesis. So if you think about things that impact, think about your car. If you get in an accident, you have an airbag. What does the airbag do? The airbag slows you down from the loading rate of you hitting something like your steering wheel, right? You're slowing that down. So the same kind of thing, we're slowing down the loading rate. So if there are pressures or pressure spots inside the socket, we're slowing that loading rate down so they don't cause as much damage. And then let's go over here to the descending slopes. With descending slopes, we have a 78% reduction. So we're even more reducing the peak internal stresses going down a ramp, and 78% on the loading rate as well. So we're slowing the prosthesis down, or loading the prosthesis even slower going down a ramp. And that's all great. And this middle one here is where my patient that lived in Houston on the flat ground that I was talking about, this is where she benefited, and I didn't understand it at the time. But what was happening to her is she was getting an 81% reduction in internal stresses on the limb on level ground. And the loading rate was reduced by 87%. That is a massive amount. 87% reduction in loading rate. That was slowing her down dramatically, not in walking speed, because again, she got on average, a 7% increase in walking speed, but it slowed down how she was loading the prosthesis. It cushioned that loading rate, if you will. So it protected that residual limb. So her really small, bony residual limb without much protection, this helped improve that. So it protected that residual limb. Swing phase with the echelon. So we talked about, again, 58% reported fall in the previous year. With a hydraulic ankle of 3 degrees of dorsiflexion in our pivot axis point. Remember, those are two critical aspects to the design of this study. It shows an 18% increase in minimum toe clearance, which equates to about 2 centimeters of toe clearance when you're walking. 2 centimeters, that's nearly an inch, right? So roughly 3/4 of an inch. That's more than an extension cord walking, laying across the floor, or the transition from a hard floor to carpet. It's going to help prevent them from catching their toe as much. So makes a big difference. So in swing phase with the echelon, when you're walking down a ramp, again, we're still talking minimum toe clearance here. You can see the difference in minimum toe clearance. When you walk down a ramp on level ground, that's your 18% right here, but then uphill also. So it's showing a difference on all the different types of slopes, and decrease of, or an increase in minimum toe clearance. And we talked about K2. We talked about getting up out of a chair. So the 6 degrees of Dorsey, again, that 6 degrees is really important for the K2 user. They have the most struggle with this, right? Getting up out of a chair. So this allows them to place the base of their support, in other words, both limbs underneath them, in a more posterior position, reduces the peak hip moment. So reduces that moment by 33%. In other words, it makes it much easier to get up out of a chair. But again, let's talk about K2s, right? We talked about them walking 10% slower. Well, with an Avalon hydraulic ankle, we show a 6.5% increase in walking speed during a 6-minute walk test. and a 34% reduction in stance phase timing. Asymmetry, again, asymmetry, asymmetry, asymmetry. We are bringing symmetry back together. So we're reducing asymmetry, meaning they're making it more symmetrical when they stand. They're able to stand in a more symmetrical position. And the PEQ, 14% mean increase in the PEQ, the prosthetic evaluation questionnaire for the Avalon users compared to previous non-hydraulic feet. So they like it more. And again, we've got this study available. It's on our website at Blatchford, blatchfordus.com. So that's our white paper on K2 users. But I mentioned the Elan series briefly. We're not going to go into a whole lot of detail here, but just know we have two microprocessor controlled hydraulic ankles, the Elan and the Elan IC. The Elan IC again is inductive charging. That's what the IC stands for, and that makes it IP67 waterproof rating. And we also have this other hydraulic ankle, and that's the Lynx foot. The Lynx is a one system. It's a knee and a foot operating together, but the foot portion is a microprocessor controlled hydraulic ankle. That microprocessor control does similar things to the Elan, but what it also does is sends that information to the knee, and the knee makes changes. The foot says, hey, wait a minute, we're going down a ramp. We need to make some changes, and the knee and sends that information to the knee so it can make changes when they're going down a ramp or up a ramp or standing still. Does all these things for the user. So extremely advanced. So amputee benefit summary: increased comfort, enhanced stability, improved posture, more even loading, more energy efficient, natural feeling and proprioception, added toe clearance, faster self-selected speed and less hindrance, and a better quality of life. So I think before I go to the next slide, I just want to say real quick, one of my first slides said why it should be your first choice. I really believe firmly in hydraulic ankles and have seen it work so many times. It's one of those products, if you haven't done it or haven't done it in a long time, give it a go again. We can come in, we can do trials. This is just a snippet of information. This isn't a die-hard course in hydraulic ankles. This is just a snippet of information to provide to you so you understand a little bit more about why we believe so firmly in hydraulics and why we've created so many hydraulic ankles in the market. It's because we believe in the science and believe in the evidence of it. So please, if you talk to your territory manager, we'll come in, we'll teach a course, and give you more credits on it. We'll come in, we'll fit some of your patients. We can do trials with it. We can do all that kind of stuff with it. So definitely give it a go. There is a question Marty's asked about bilaterals. I'll go on to the next slide and then I'll answer that one. Before I answer that question, this is our quiz. Scan the QR code there for the quiz. You've got my email there and Caleb's email. If you have any questions after the webinar that pops up, feel free to email us. But that's the QR code for the quiz. I will be sending it out again on a link, and you have about a week to complete it. So is it good for bilaterals? You can use it on bilaterals. Absolutely. There's no problem with it. It does take a little bit of getting used to sometimes, so you do have to work with that a little bit. We fit them all the time, but you do have to be aware of that. So what I would suggest is an Elan. The Elan, one feature of the Elan is it has the ability to ramp up the resistance. As soon as you stop moving, within 0.8 seconds, it's going to say, wait a minute, the user has stopped moving. They need additional balance, and it's going to ramp up the hydraulic resistance so they can stand there more comfortably without constantly going backward or forwards. That being said, if they can't get the Elan for whatever reason, the hydraulics do work, but it is a caution. You just have to make sure they have good balance. So I hope that helped, Marty. And we'll pause here for any additional questions. Somebody's got their hand up. Trent, we don't have the ability to let you talk. Can you type it into the Q&A panel there? Now, I see a couple people dropping off. If you have scanned the quiz and you don't have any questions, feel free to drop off, but I will stick around for any additional questions. I do want to thank you though, while we're waiting here, waiting for questions. Again, um, it's such a joy to look down at the attendee list and see what these do. What's the effect of these ankles on stance flexion knees? That is such a great question. Why do we need stance flexion? You're welcome, Martha. So the why do we need stance flexion? One of the main reasons is shock absorption, right? Well, I didn't even go into the shock absorption effect of these hydraulic ankles, but the natural plantar flexion motion does provide additional shock absorption. So if the knee is set up to require a lot of stance flexion, you can certainly get that, but you may not find you need to because the hydraulic ankle absorbs so much. Some patients really don't like that almost wobbly feeling, if you will, of when you land on your heel and get that rapid knee flexion moment, and you come over during normal stance flexion. Some patients don't like that. So a hydraulic ankle will absorb it enough to where you don't have to have that. So it does have an effect if you want it. If you don't, the hydraulic ankle does absorb stuff. And there was a study done by I think it was Tyler Clineau. He did a study, and he may be on the webinar. If he is, send me a text, Tyler. I haven't seen his name on here, but if he is, um, I hope I'm quoting you right. It was a paper done many years ago, and it was looking at overall shock absorption of various shock absorbing feet. And the Echelon VT came out very, very well because not only does it have a VT unit, but it's got the motion of the plantar flexion. So the addition of the plantar flexion motion and the VT unit provided a ton of shock absorption, which really helps with that stance flexion also. Sean, the webinar is being recorded. You can find it on our YouTube channel. It may not be there tomorrow, but probably on Monday. It will be on there. But thanks for joining when you could. So Kevin asked a question about Kevin. This may be a little bit more specific to your particular patient. I can feel free to send me an email, but I can chime in a little bit about basic standing static alignment. You said you tried changing the alignment, so you probably tried exactly what I'm going to say. But if they're leaning into hyperextension, you want to do an anterior shift so that the weight line is in front of the knee center, the ankle pivot point. I'm sure you did that. So if it's still continuing, you may want to look at your heel spring. It may be a little bit soft. Also, your plantar flexion adjustment resistance level there as well. But shoot me an email or give me a call, and I'd be happy to talk you through some more settings, myself or Caleb. Repair times are improving. I can tell you that much. I don't know where they are. I haven't got a report recently, but we are diligently working to improve repair times. Know that that is heavily on our mind. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Dory. Cheers to you. I'll be in England next week. Cheers. Yep, Kevin, you said like you did the right thing. So please email me, and I'd be happy to talk more. Or if you will, Kevin, Caleb, if you'll send a message to him with my phone number or your phone number, that'd be great. People are dropping off like flies. I think that's all the questions then. I do have one more minute, so I might as well stick around. All right, well, I think that is about it. Again, thank you for joining. Look for us next month. We will be doing another one. We do these every month, every Thursday, unless there's a holiday or something, and I'm out of town next week. So every Thursday, if we can, every third Thursday of the month at about 2:00 Eastern. So thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day.